welcome to another edition of Progress and Promise. As you are watching this, the beach tourism season is getting fired up for its busiest time of year. But we would like to pause for a moment and rewind the tourism calendar to look at one of the newest, and I believe coolest, successes of the 2014 tourism season. Pensacon may have seemed to appear out of nowhere on the scene in February, but it was an event that was years in the making. Joining me is my lovely co-host, Molly Barrows.
Yeah, what a fantastic event. It seems like it came out of nowhere, but 11,000 people attended this event. That was very impressive.
It did, and you know, there's an immense amount of planning that went into it. It is not an idea that sprung fully formed from the head of Zeus, as it were.
Right.
In just a little bit of time. Mike Ensley, the chairman of Pensacon, spent many years working on the idea, and we are so lucky because he is here with us today.
That's right, Mike Ensley. You are the head of Zeus, if you will. You are the man that birthed this amazing idea, and you said this is something that you've been thinking about for some time and didn't realize it was going to blossom into what it did.
Well, I'm going to make a confession to you guys. I've been a nerd my whole life. So yeah,
That's okay.
It's been in my brain for a long time, absolutely.
It's a profitable thing to be these days, especially.
Absolutely.
Finally.
Absolutely. So what was the germ, the seed that made you think of this?
Well, I was, like I said, I've always been interested in sci-fi and horror and fantasy and all of those things since I was a child. A few years ago, I just started thinking, Pensacola really needs something like this. Pop culture has really been taken over by the sort of nerd culture. Like, if you look at the highest grossing films, it's things like The Hunger Games and The Avengers and Disney animated films, and that's what's in the top 10 movies of last year. Everything was pretty much that kind of film. So I thought, well, what if we could bring all of that together? They have big conventions in San Diego and Atlanta and other places. Why can't we do something on a large scale here in Pensacola? Because we can do it.
Obviously, we can do it. You guys packed 11,000 people into the Pensacola Bay Center over 3 days. The best part, nobody got arrested. Nobody got in trouble. It was beautiful.
Yeah, incredibly well-behaved crowd. And it was very interesting that, 60% of the crowd was from locally here, and then 40% came from out of town. So it was a really great way to showcase Pensacola as well.
Now, initially, you thought this was just going to be an event that you could host inside the Crowne Plaza Grand Hotel. You talked about just their conference rooms and the area downstairs. And then what happened as you started to put the word out? Tell us a little bit about how it snowballed.
Well, social media happened. Social media is probably the most effective way to get the word out about anything these days. And once we started posting about this on social media, we started a Facebook page, and within, I'd say, 4 or 5 hours, we had over 100 people that liked it. The next day, it was up to 500 people. And within a week or two, we had, over 1,000 people on the page. So we knew we had hit on an idea that people were hungry for, so we just tried to leverage from there. And by the time we got the Crowne Plaza booked, we knew we had really pretty much outgrown it. So that's when we started talking to the Bay Center.
And that was really your only option. One
Absolutely.
of the things that I thought was interesting that Shannon researched is that this could be an even bigger event. You're already planning for 2015, but the problem is finding a space big enough to hold all of these folks.
Yeah, and luckily, what we did in some respects was we made downtown Pensacola our third venue. We worked with all of the restaurants and stores and things on Palafox. We partnered with Gallery Night and the Downtown Improvement Board. So if you went down to Gallery Night on that Friday night of Pensacon, there were people in costumes out roaming the streets. A lot of the bars and restaurants had theme parties going on. I know one person who's been, very outspoken is Joe Abston who owns Hopjacks and the Tin Cow. He said the Tin Cow had their best weekend ever, the weekend of Pensacon, and in the history of that business. So he held a Walking Dead party on Saturday night, and we had some guests from the Walking Dead at Pensacon. We had Lou Temple, who played Axel on the show, and Theo Crane, who played Big Tiny. They were, sort of the prisoner characters on that show, if you're familiar with the show. And then we had several walkers, people who actually played zombies on the show. And they all went down and hung out at the Tin Cow with the fans, and everybody had dinner and had a great time. And like I said, it was super successful. The same thing at Hopjacks. They did a Star Wars themed party. They had people there from our local group, the 501st, who do the screen-accurate costumes. So they had the Stormtroopers and Darth Vader and Boba Fett and all these characters from Star Wars that everybody's very familiar with were at Hopjacks, and as well as Dave Dorman, the artist who's probably most well associated with Star Wars. It was there, and they hung out all evening. We held at Vinyl Music Hall. We held a Doctor Who party, which a last minute addition to that was everyone's talking about Game of Thrones. This season has been amazing, but we had Christian Narn, who plays Hodor, is actually a DJ in real life. He started out as a DJ. Game of Thrones is his first acting
Wow.
job.
So multi-talented.
Really, he
So,
is.
so he came up and did a full DJ set at the Vinyl Music Hall.
Wow.
The place was packed. It was really amazing. We had, the TARDIS, the blue box from Doctor Who that he travels in. We had a replica there that licensed by the BBC that was there at the party. We had actors who appeared in the show. Simon Fisher-Becker, who played one of the Doctor's companions in the show, was there. They came up on stage and talked about Doctor Who and their experiences and got the crowd pumped up, and it just was amazing evening all around. I think at the end of the day, we had like 17 different parties going on that Saturday night.
And you guys did not, you spared no expense. You had really a great list of celebrity guests, and we've touched on some of the Game of Thrones folks who were there. It was not, it was set up in a way that Pensacola could be proud of what we were able to draw. How'd you manage that?
How did I manage that?
How did you manage that?
Well,
Give us your secrets.
it was just a kind of a learning experience. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing when I started this. I knew a few people here and there that I had, met over the years. I've been doing things in Pensacola events and, hosting my own little horror TV show for a long time. So I knew a few people, so I reached out to those people, and they sort of helped me reach out to other people.
They knew some people.
Yeah, and I mean, the first guest that we wanted to get, and that I said to myself, we need a guest for this convention. We need somebody who spans all generations, who's in a super popular something that will be, and happens to be a hero of mine as well, my favorite character. So I reached out to Peter Mayhew, who played Chewbacca in Star Wars, and I said, Peter, would you be willing to come to Pensacola? And honestly, there was trepidation there because they said this has never happened in Pensacola before. We don't normally do that for a first year event, and I really had to talk and convince him and his agents that this was going to be a great thing, and he signed on with us, and it was great. That was the first person that I went after and the first person I got. And
Now you can die a happy man.
I am. I can. I can. It's really funny. In the rush, and I'll just tell a personal story just to illustrate this. When the convention happened, I was very, very busy, obviously.
Yes.
So I have a mug that I bought when I was a kid. It's a Chewbacca mug. It's a big ceramic mug of Chewbacca's head, and I was going to get Peter Mayhew to sign that for me.
Absolutely.
Because I wanted to have
Yes.
it. I wanted to have that as my personal piece of memorabilia, and I forgot all about it. So luckily, my wife went home and got it for me and brought it down and took it to me and gave it to me afterwards. And that was probably the greatest thing that happened to me all of Pensacon weekend, because I got something, a personal, very personal thing. So, and I saw over the weekend a lot of people having those same kind of experiences. So that really touched me and really was amazing to me. I mean, we had someone drive in. The show Stargate is very popular.
Yes.
Christopher Judge, one of the stars of that show, was here. We had a guy drive in from Orlando. He had a custom-made guitar that looked like the Stargate from the show.
Wow.
And he was his goal is to get.
Does it open a world into another universe?
Well, I guess if you play it right.
Play it right.
But he wanted his goal was to get autographs from all the cast of Stargate. So he said this is the closest Chris Judge has ever been to Orlando. So he drove up 8 hours. We set it up so he could meet Chris. Chris saw the guitar, and Chris was just blown away by the guitar. And they got to talk for about 30 minutes and talk about the guitar and talk about Stargate. And he left here, a very happy person.
Yeah.
So, and we tried to facilitate that kind of stuff where we could. So.
And it sounds like you were successful, and what you're describing is almost being a kid again. And it sounds like it gave a lot of people who attended a chance to enjoy those hobbies and those characters that they grew up with. And in fact, that was interesting what you mentioned before, that the average age of the person who you found attended this event. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we found that 2/3 of the folks that came were under 45, but the average attendee, the average age of the attendee was 39 years old. So there were a lot of folks who were in my age range. I'm a little bit older than that, but who were my age range who wanted to relive the past a little bit. There's a nostalgia factor. It's interesting how the nostalgia factor rolls out. For my age, Star Wars. We had Peter Mayhew here. We had Daniel Logan from the new Star Wars films. So Star Wars crosses all boundaries. Everybody loves Star Wars. But then we found like Battlestar Galactica. We had Dirk Benedict and Richard Hatch.
I love that one.
And Anne Lockhart and Herb Jefferson. So we had the 4 colonial warriors from the original Battlestar Galactica series in the 70s.
great.
And so we figured that, and that reached my crowd. We loved that. We were very excited to see them. I got to talk to all of them. It was great. Yeah. We found out that, kids who are 30, maybe 28 to 35 or so, you know what their big thing is?
I have no idea.
None whatsoever.
Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. The
For real?
original
Really?
Saturday morning Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
Wow.
It's
Interesting.
huge.
Wow.
I had no idea. I couldn't name one if you threatened
No.
me.
And I couldn't either. And that was interesting. But when I started talking to people, I found that's what they were all asking for. Can you get us the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers?
Wow.
So we got two. The original Blue and Black Ranger were here, and they came, and they were incredibly popular. So that we hit that age group as well. And, and then we, like I said, we did more modern stuff as well. Doctor Who, which is huge right now. Game of Thrones, we had folks from that. The Walking Dead. So we tried to hit, these different groups across all age ranges. We also had guests, horror guests. So we had Kane Hodder, who played Jason in the Friday the 13th movies. And we had, like I said, the folks from The Walking Dead. And then comic book artists. We had Neil Adams, probably the most famous living comic book artist there is, was here. And authors, we had, Joe Lansdale, his work's been adapted for many things, but he's got a new film coming out called The Bottoms that stars Michael C. Hall, who was in Dexter. That film has just been released. He's going on the festival circuit right now. And then Tim Zahn, who's another Star Wars author. So we tried to hit, a wide variety of groups and different fandoms and interests.
What did you see that you might do a little more of next year and maybe a little less of? How are you going to adjust?
Well, we went very Star Wars heavy this
You
year.
did.
So next year we're going a little Star Trek heavy. I can tell you that. And the first guest that we've announced, we announced for this year, is we have Nichelle Nichols, who played Lieutenant Uhura on the original Star Trek, who's going to be here.
Fantastic.
So we've already signed her up. We've got Tony Todd, who is an actor who's probably best known for playing the Candyman in the horror series,
Yeah.
but he's also a very important character in the latter-day Star Trek series. He played a Klingon character on that show. So he's been on
Nice.
several of the shows. So so another Star Trek kind of tie. And if you guys keep your eyes peeled, you'll see a lot more Star Trek guests are coming in. There'll be a lot more folks we'll announce down the road. And there's some other interesting. There's a lot of stuff in the works. That's all I can say at this point.
Well, since this was your first year and you mentioned you had to do a little coaxing to get some of these big name stars to come this time, do you think you're going to have that trouble the next time?
No, we don't have that trouble, and because success speaks for itself. We marketed this thing in-house. I mean, I did it for about 6 months by myself, essentially. I did all the social media. I still do all the social media for Pensacon. So if you see something on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, whatever site we're on, that's me doing that, because I try to keep control of that, because I understand how important it is. We found we had a study done, and we found that I believe it was 20% of people found out about this convention through social media. That was bigger than any other segment of what we did, including billboards and print
Really?
and radio and anything else. It was all social media that was really driving it.
And that's a smart way to keep it alive in the off season, as it were.
Oh, absolutely.
And to generate that interest all year long, you're exactly right.
Yeah, and we try to be a news source for those folks too that come to our convention. So we tell them about when the new Justice League movie's announced, or when there's a new Star Wars, something happening with the new Star Wars movie. We try to post that on our page as well. We don't just post about ourselves. We try to keep a level of engagement so that people know that we are them.
Well, the main theme that I'm hearing, aside from just the excitement of, getting to relive your childhood a little bit, the nostalgia, is that there's money in nerds, is what you're saying. And that you are well organized, and so many businesses downtown benefited, and it looks like they're going to be on board again for this next year. Absolutely. So I guess how do you overcome some of the stumbling blocks, which is finding more space? Fortunately for you, you did have a well-behaved crowd. The fire marshal didn't have to come in, as Shannon learned, and he was keeping a close eye, making sure that you guys didn't get too crowded, even though you surpassed the amount that was allowed to be there at the Bay Center. But because they were so well behaved, everything was fine.
Yeah, and we dispersed them about the building as best we could. So we had some people go up into the stands, and actually that turned into a benefit for us, because a lot of people, when you go to a convention where it's just an open convention center, there's nowhere to sit. So you're on your feet all day long. So people really enjoyed that in the end. They didn't like to get to sit up there. But yeah, the fire marshal came on Saturday morning. We had, at any given time, we had over probably 1,500 people in line to get tickets.
Wow.
It was just a huge line. It wrapped around the hotel over into the parking lots. It was crazy. And the fire marshal came, and he was freaking out. He was really like, what are we going to do with all of these people?
That's his job. It's understandable.
But he walked up, and he said that one of our people walked with him and said, well, just come with me and let me show you something. So they walked up, and they said, excuse me, we need to get through. And the people just parted, and everybody walked through. And they walked right into the lobby of the hotel, and there was no issues. And the fire marshal said, I'm fine with this. He said, these people are so well behaved. And unfortunately, people had to wait. There's no way to process. I mean, we processed them as fast as we could to get them into the convention, but people had to wait over an hour sometimes, and they entertained
they did it.
themselves. Well, they entertained themselves. There were people out there in costumes. We had a guy dressed as the Silver Surfer, the Marvel character.
fantastic.
And he was just entertaining people the whole time on his own. So, the costumes at this thing were, definitely amazing as well.
So there's a good spirit, it sounds like, around the crowd as well. And I know that y'all worked hard to get, to build on that sort of sense of community. You had an event ahead of the convention, and you have some other things planned.
We do. Well, The Walking Dead,
Huge.
huge
Definitely.
show, pretty big show. So the Sunday before Pensacon started on a Friday, so we said on the Sunday we wanted to do something fun just to get everybody pumped up for the convention. So we planned a zombie run. Now, and basically what we did is we partnered with World of Beer downtown, and they had a running club already that ran, and they got those people in, and we instead of asking for an entry fee, we said you bring cans of food for Mana. And so everybody brought cans of food, and we ended up collecting over 1,400 pounds of food for Mana.
Impressive.
Canned goods. We filled up a truck. It was great. We had.
And you chase zombies.
Yeah, well, we had.
They don't run fast, thankfully.
Well, these were quick zombies. Trust me. I think we had something in the neighborhood of 175 runners in the event.
Great.
But then we had almost 200 and something zombies. And we had our own makeup artists down there making everybody up. They could come in their own zombie makeup if they wanted to, but we had folks that were doing their makeup for them. So we had the zombies. So you could either be a runner and take off, and you got about a 30-second head start. And then we had gates up, and you see it. It's very interesting. You can see it on YouTube. There's some footage of it. But we had gates up, and we had guys in hazmat suits, and they were holding back the zombies as long as they could. And then the zombies broke down the gates, and it was just that everybody had flags. The runners had flags, so the zombies could pull their flags. And once their flag was pulled, they were a zombie. So then they could attack the other people.
Oh, that's great. So no biting involved.
There was
That's
no biting
bonus.
involved. No.
That's good. That's good.
No.
That's good.
Well, Mike, in the time that we have left, what do you think is important for planning for next year? About bringing good attention to Pensacola, what are your thoughts on where you see this going and how big it could be?
Well, we in these type of events, we found that if case studies around the country are any indication, they tend to double if they're successful the first year. So we figured, at least 15,000 people a day next year will probably come through the doors for Pensacon. So that's going to be a challenge because we have limited space. The Pensacola Bay Center, great facility, but not perfect for this kind of event. And we don't have any other options here in Pensacola. So we are expanding into downtown as much as we can. There's some other meeting space that's down there that we may use. I know we've spoken with the Sanger Theater about perhaps doing an event there, maybe perhaps holding our costume contest there because it was so well attended. So there's some other folks that we're going to work with. The main thing is just we want to keep the level up that what we had last year. We want to keep it a fun event for everybody, but we want to have celebrities here that everybody wants to see, that everybody's going to enjoy. And working with the Downtown Improvement Board has been great. They've been very supportive of the event. We tried to make a presence of ourselves there at every meeting they had leading up to this, and we're still there and with them now, working with them. So, and a lot of people said, how did you get all these businesses on board downtown? And we said, well, we asked them. That was the main key to it.
Fancy that.
Imagine that. Just asking.
It's a good lead. You've certainly modeled something very successful for us, and maybe this is a sign of better things to come for Pensacola, not just with Pensacon, but a way to show other people how to do it right, how to work with downtown businesses and bring it in.
Well, and I can tell you that, when we did our surveys, we found that 98% said they would come back for Pensacon next year, but 93% said they would come back to Pensacola just to visit. So they really were impressed with our city.
Well, great job, Mike.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Well, thank you.
All right. Well, it sounds like a really good turnout. And for those
Fantastic turnout.
Yeah, for those folks who may have missed it, I'm telling you, the costumes alone were phenomenal. Just to see those folks walking around downtown Pensacola.
It was great.
I know. So if you did miss it, here are some of the highlights.
Mike, thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you for all that you guys did with Pensacon, and we wish you so much more success next year than you had this year. We can't wait.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you so much. It was very exciting. I learned a lot, not just about the world of fantasy, but exciting things to come from Pensacola. So we appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Pensacon is going places, and if Pensacola is smart, we will help it get there. The sci-fi, comic book, fantasy, horror, and gaming pop culture convention packed out the Pensacola Bay Center in its first year on a big local stage. Though the idea had been in Chairman Mike Ensley's mind for years, Ensley teamed with Ben Galicki, CEO of Cinematic Entertainment, at just the right time. Nerd culture has sort of become the pop culture of our society, Ensley says. Try to find a top-grossing movie or a hit TV show that isn't rooted in sci-fi, fantasy, comics, or nerd love. Walking Dead, anyone? Big Bang Theory much? Iron Man, Man of Steel, Hunger Games? If you know what it means when I say the night is dark and full of terrors, you're part of the nerd revolution. The 2014 event pumped $1.4 million into the local economy during tourism's slow season and packed 11,000 people into the Bay Center over 3 days. Galicki and Ensley started planning Pensacon 2015, almost before this year's event ended. Galicki says he has at least a 10-year plan for the convention and sees it living long and prospering well into the future. The only thing limiting how big Pensacon can grow is the absence of a true convention center space big enough to hold the kinds of crowds the organizers are sure they can attract. Galicki and Ensley are eager to partner with other venues throughout downtown to host Pensacon events. The folks at the Sanger Theater have shown interest, and others seem eager to help, which is great news because Pensaconers are just the kind of visitors Pensacola needs more of. Why? The average age of the con-goer was 39, with a household income of almost $61,000, who spent 3 nights here. Organizers planned it specifically for the slow season for maximum impact on the city's bottom line. About 40% of the attendees came from out of town. 98% of them said they would come back to Pensacola for Pensacon, and somewhere around 73% said they would just come back to visit. The crowd was large, but very, very well behaved. Galicki said the fire marshal spent a lot of time with them on Saturday, and even as the crowd swelled to near beyond the Bay Center's capacity, the fire marshal never shut down access, in large part because people were patient and orderly when asked to wait and minded their manners in general. That didn't go unnoticed. This crowd was orderly, tidy, polite, and spent money, says 18-year police officer Maria Landy. The potential revenue that could occur in the years to follow is staggering, she says. Many cities try to cater to a tourist crowd that has a hidden cost on the city's resources and infrastructure. This crowd has minimal impact. Something tells me the report from a Party Down South video shoot would have been a little different, which is why we would be wise to embrace Mike and Ben and the Pensacon folks rather than burning up our email accounts trying to scout locations for the next film crew that sees us as a cheaper spot than Myrtle Beach. The Pensacon organizers are working with Visit Pensacola officials to help expand the con's footprint in downtown, all to help the city they clearly love. We did manage to showcase Pensacola in a way that it hadn't been showcased before to an audience we may not have been reaching before, so we find that to be a very exciting thing, Ensley said. Proof positive that nerds rule. Thank you for joining us. Please follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and be sure to tune in next time. Thanks.